Welcome to this week's episode of Analyzing Chazal. This week we'll be analyzing the commentary of Rashi on this week's Pרשת Emor. Let's see the pasuk. Perek Aleph, pasuk test. The pasuk says, "Ubas ish kohen ki sechel is nos esovia imechaleles bo'esh tisoreif." And the daughter of the Kohen that committed adultery, she profaned her father, and her punishment for this sin is death by a sreifa. Rashi. Chalala ubizisa es kvodo she'omrim alav arur shezu yalad arur shezu gadal. She profaned and disgraced his honor, that people will say, "Cursed is the one who gave birth to this girl, and cursed to the one who raised this girl." The explanation of Rashi. Rashi is explaining the reason that the daughter of the Kohen who commits adultery receives a punishment that is more severe than a woman who is not a Kohen who also commits adultery, which is that people will shame her father, saying, "Cursed is the man that gave birth and raised this child." The type of question we'll be using is that the Torah seems to be making a difference between two things which would seem to be similar. The hint. Consider the actions of the Bas Kohen versus the Bas Yisrael. Okay, let's stop for a minute, and with the type of question we'll be using and the hint, can you come up with the question yourself? Okay, here's the question. It seems from Rashi that the reason that the Bas Kohen is given a more severe punishment is that she caused her father to be shamed, as people will say about him that he raised such an evil child. However, that would not be the case regarding the Bas Yisrael. That being the case, is it possible to say that if two girls committed the same sin, people will say that the one whose father was a Kohen did a worse job raising her than the father who was the Yisrael? The answer, as we always say, comes from within the question, which was, is it possible to say that two girls who committed the same sin, people will say that the one whose father was a Kohen did a worse job raising her than the father who was the Yisrael? The answer, of course, is yes. And the reason can be that naturally a person who was raised in the house of a Kohen, who were from the leaders and teachers of Bnei Israel, would naturally be drawn to the way of Torah. And if she goes off, people will say, "Cursed is the father who raised her, as he must have done a really bad job, as even after growing up in such a house, she committed this great sin." However, someone who grew up in a regular home would not have that same natural tendency, and her father will not be looked down upon as much. The practical application. In our lives, we have a natural tendency to follow our desires, which do not always coexist well with the Torah. One of the reasons that we may give in to our desires and our Yetzer Hara is because we do not appreciate how great we really are. However, if we can focus ourselves and realize that we are the children of Hashem, and we are incredibly special, and much greater than the rest of the world's population, we will begin to feel, how can we possibly sin and run after our desires if we are so special? This is a natural feeling that will come as soon as we recognize how great we truly are. Have a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll see you next week for Parshas Bahar.